Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We're joined today all the way from Georgia with Leon Hammond, McIntosh High School assistant principal and athletic director, and he'll tell you how that's a combined job in their school. But Coach, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate you.
All right, well, let's dive in. Take us through your background as a coach. How'd you get into this deal? What was the process like for you landing your first job? And then how did that translate to being both in academic administration and athletic administration? Take us through that journey.
Got you. So I think for me, really started back in high school like a lot of us. But the most influential people I had in my life growing up were my coaches. And that was huge for me because, growing up, stepfather there, but not really the best relationship with him, not knowing my dad, mom trying to raise three boys. My coaches kind of stayed on me, made sure I stayed focused on the academic piece, and then made me better as an athlete. So, I value those relationships. And one of my coaches, Coach White, my offensive line coach, said, hey, my only thing I expect from you is whatever I give to you, you got to give back to somebody else. So for me, I knew I wanted to coach. I knew I wanted to work with kids in some capacity. I didn't want to teach from a textbook, so I went the PE route. First, I went athletic training because I love my athletic trainer. But, in college freshman year, I got tired of wrapping my roommates size 17 foot. So I said, I'm going to transition out of that role. I went the PE route. So, going the PE route, really my first coaching job, I was a senior in college and I was doing my student teaching, but the school I was student teaching at Kenmore West in Kenmore, New York, which is right outside of Buffalo. I started coaching there, was working with the offensive line, working with the JV and varsity. So that was really where I really got my toes wet into the coaching game. So that was my first gig. And then after that, I got a job in Buffalo Public Schools. I was working at McKinley High School where I coached football, did basketball, boys and girls track. So, three-trick pony for a while. But, I just really had to make myself valuable by coaching whatever I could coach, but also having experience in all three of those sports. It made it easy. And at McKinley, a lot of our kids were doing multiple sports. So it just made sense for me to transition from football to those kids who play basketball. And then obviously I wanted my football players doing track or something in the spring to keep them, ready for the next season. So, I did that, which was probably one of my toughest gigs because, my head coach wasn't really one that was helping us. But in Buffalo, it being kind of small, I knew a lot of those kids from when I used to run after school programs at the elementary level. So when I got to the high school program, I knew a chunk of those kids already and had relationships with them. So for him, that was kind of, he kind of distanced himself from me because they were looking to me for advice. One, because I played. Two, I had relationships with them already. I knew them from the community. I knew them from the rec centers. I would go to games with them. I just was around. And being a younger guy, I could relate to them more. So, I did that piece and had a good experience at McKinley. Me and my guy, Coach Doris, we won the state championship in basketball, which was the first large school state championship from a public school from in the city of Buffalo. So that was great. Next year, 2014, transitioned and moved to South Carolina. That was like eye-opening for me because I was, grew up in the city, went to Canisius College, which is in the city of Buffalo, coached in the city of Buffalo. And then I go to Orangeburg, South Carolina, which is really rural. It's kind of like in between Columbia and Charleston off Highway 26, but it was small. So I think the first school I worked at was maybe 400 kids, K through 12. So it was a really small school, but came in, got with a good football program there. That season, we won a state championship, which was the second one for them back-to-back, my first one with them. So that ended up being a really good experience at that school. And then I transitioned over to the next year I moved to Colleton County High School, which is down 95, moving towards Hilton Head. I went there. It was a bigger school, but again, still rural. And then initially I was going to coach football, didn't see eye to eye with the coach when I got there. He had a different vision than, what I was used to. So I got with the basketball program, continued to coach there, and was in that role for like maybe 2 years before I transitioned into the athletic director role. So I became the county AD. So it was Colleton's small district, one high school, one middle school, like 6 elementary schools. So, football coach, they were separating the position. In South Carolina, some smaller districts still do AD with football coach. And obviously, a lot of people, especially now, that becomes a little contentious because it's the AD favoring the program that he is responsible for. So, they separated those positions, and I was actually on the interview committee for the head coach. And I was like, cool, I'll help out, whatever you need me to do. So the principal came to me and said, hey, you should apply for the AD role. We're separating them, so I did and got that job. And that was really my first foray into administration, but also just really the athletic administrative piece. So trying to really pick up the pieces from a program that it's a system level of programs that were not being treated equitably or kept up to speed because that football coach was focused on football, which I get. So everything else kind of fell by the wayside, especially at the middle school level or elementary levels that kind of feed into us. So that was my biggest task, was trying to repair those programs, repair relationships, really relationships within coaches and the community, because, we had a lot of talent there and we weren't putting any kids in school. And more importantly, which was unfortunate, we had a lot of kids come out of football season who would be ineligible for spring or winter. So from an academic standpoint, I felt like the ball had been dropped and those kids were kind of being used for the athletic abilities, but nothing to show for it when it came after that. So we were in South Carolina, my wife and my family and I were in South Carolina for about 4 years, five years. And then we moved to Georgia, where we currently are. So I'm living in Fayetteville, Georgia. I interviewed probably in 4 weeks. I was back and forth from South Carolina to Georgia driving for about 4 or 5 interviews before I finally landed the role at McIntosh. So to what you were saying earlier, when I got here, the position in this particular county, which differs from a lot of other counties here, you are athletic director and assistant principal. And I flip those and say, really, assistant principal with some athletic director duties that you really do. Because the primary role of your job here is assistant principal. You got the observation of teachers, you got students, you got discipline, I got student safety, I have, fire drills and, severe weather drills, custodians are on my to-do list. So I have a lot of those roles. And then there's also the AD role, which a lot of people think starts after school, but no, it starts during the school day with getting buses arranged. If your athletes are getting in trouble or parents want to, come in and have discussions about coaches. So, I transitioned to this role. Took me a good minute to get adjusted because I came in 2019. Obviously, COVID hits 2020. We don't finish the school year. Here in Georgia, we come back 2020, school year 2020, 2021. We start off that fall. We're in like a hybrid model where some kids are coming on this day, some are coming on that. Then we had to quarantine kids and send kids home. They tested positive and contact trace people who were around them. So really, I feel like my first official year was 22, 23 because the first 2 were just so odd. But, the sports has always been my passion. And then I've learned the AP role as I went along, which, it takes some time, but I got a good admin staff surrounding me, which has helped me, begin to master that role. But really, it can be complicated at times. But I would say for me, the sports is always the reprieve. It's the break. When I get to games, I get to supervise, manage games, get to work in that realm. That's the easy part of my day, because I'm not having to chase kids around, sit around at lunch duty, get you back to class, where you going, discipline, call parents about this. The sports is simple. Either you're good enough or you're not. We gotta fight hard to win, versus all the subjective stuff that I get as an AP.
No doubt. And that's quite the journey. And I got some things I want to dig into that are off track here. So if I heard you correctly, your first head coaching, air quote, job was becoming an AD. Up until then, you were just working with the program's assistant.
Yeah, outside of being a head JV coach or filling in when my coach got ejected or something like that.
Yeah.
That was really it. I coached under some good guys, but I kind of really moved around a little bit, where I think time was coming for me to take roles, but then I moved like in Buffalo, time was coming for me to take over the football program, but that move came. It was the best move for my family and I. So, we transitioned to South Carolina. So yeah, as far as being the top dog of a varsity program, no, I never had that experience.
Perfect. I would imagine that's an outlier career path for most people in your role. And as such, it actually leads me to what I usually ask about being a program lead, which is, what did you realize right away that you needed to figure out? And considering you had never worn the hat of program lead, and
Mhm.
now you're kind of jumping over that to departmental lead.
Right.
And you coached with some really good leaders in multiple disciplines. You had a
Mhm.
broad spectrum of experience. What did you realize right away, right? That, hey, I'm ready. Oh, but we're never ready.
Really, I think the biggest thing I learned, especially because it happened in South Carolina, was the relationship piece. That was the biggest thing for me that you think, and I mean, maybe it's cliche, but people tend to think you change when you take a position, they change. And they change, especially because these were my peers. This was a coach I coached under. Now I'm in charge of you. You know what I'm saying? And there's other coaches who you used to fraternize with in a different way. Now you're over them. So really that relationship piece and how to manage that and effectively not blur the line between friend and subordinate, that's the biggest thing I learned. I think even if I was leading the program, if you're coming into a position where you're ascending to that head coach and then you still have some guys who are on your staff that were your colleagues or your friends, you may went out and had a beer with them. You may, talk crap about the head coach because you was pissed about the game. I think that was the biggest piece I had to say, okay, how do I manage this without, you know, ruining a friendship, but also having to understand that I'm in charge of leading this program and creating a vision for it, the collective whole. So that was one of the things that was kind of like my wake up moment where I had to, figure it out.
On that note, you also mentioned that I forget which school, but you weren't necessarily aligned with the mission and vision of the coach. So
Gotcha.
you went and coached a different sport. And then as you were searching for your next job after South Carolina, you interviewed at 4 or 5 different places. Can you talk a little bit about not necessarily the specifics of how you didn't align, but how important that is as you are trying to find a place where you can thrive? But the significance of making sure it's mission appropriate for who you are.
Mhm. Well, I think so. When I got to South Carolina, the head coach there at the time, really the first kind of thing that got my antennas up was the finance piece. And obviously, we know that what you get in coaching and in education in general, it doesn't meet what time you give. It just doesn't align. The time and effort you put in, you don't see the reward, the money for it from a compensation standpoint. You may see it in the students, their growth, them going off to college. So that was the first piece. It was like, well, I don't have a supplement to pay you, but I can provide you with clothes. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm a grown man, like I can provide myself with clothes. Like, you know, I was already driving an hour each way to work. I need to be compensated if I'm going to be here 2-3 hours more, then leaving, coming in on Sundays to do film, and then driving back. So, where is the compensation? So that was that piece. But also from the kids I had in class, I had in PE that I developed relationships with. I didn't, for me, the student athlete truly, in student athlete, student comes first. So I knew for me, a lot of the kids that I grew up with who were phenomenal athletes, but we were in the inner city, they didn't handle their business. A lot of us were misguided youth at time without male influence. So those guys didn't necessarily have the grades to go on. I did because that was something preached in my house. But that was also something preached in from coaches that I had developed a relationship with and I took to it. So when I seen that some of those guys were still failing, and they were still out there playing on a Friday night, that was something that didn't sit well with me. Like I'm a big proponent of you got to have your grades up if you're on the field or on the court or wherever it is. So I didn't agree with that. I felt like kids were being used to win games. And then on top of that, we weren't winning like we should have, but I felt like kids were being used for Friday night or they were not getting the academic help they needed to be able to play at the next level. And there was enough talent to play at the next level. So that right there kind of put me at odds because I seen it and I didn't like it. And for me, like, you know, I got to do right by kids in all facets. I gotta help young men be responsible young men, and the same thing for young women. So that was that piece. And then the interviewing, really what happened with the interviewing is all of my interviews with the same school district. And really it was one that my wife went to this school system. It was where we're going to be living. Academically, it's a quality school system. And like I was telling you earlier, I didn't really want to have to commute in Atlanta. Like I didn't want to be driving into that traffic and, a 2-hour ride to work for 20 miles. Like it's a no-go for me. So really my first interview was with the school I'll leave them nameless, but I didn't get the job, and it was fine. I didn't get the job, but on that panel was the principal of another school because he knew his AD was going to be leaving. So he called me back for an interview, and at this time, I interviewed for McIntosh and another school again at the same time. So I interviewed for both, got a call back, interviewed again, and then on time number 4, I'm like, hey guys, like I don't mind coming to interview. I'm comfortable interviewing, but I'm literally driving 4 hours every time. And like 1 week, I was driving 4 hours there. I would get off work that night, drive up, interview in the morning, then go back because I had games to cover that night. I was like, if I'm not a legitimate candidate, when the HR person called me, I said, I understand. Let me know because I'm going to head back to work. But if I am a legit candidate, I want to stay down and not keep going back and forth. And at this time, I'd already moved my wife down and my daughter down. So I was living in South Carolina by myself. They had been down since January. This is, May, June when I'm doing this. So I'm like, hey, I prefer not to keep, coming back and forth. And, they said, all right, you're a legitimate candidate. Stay tonight. So I stayed, interviewed with the superintendent, principal at McIntosh at the time, and I got the job. For me, what aligned the most with me was really, I knew the whole school system was good in general. So I really didn't have any, particular place I wanted to be. But I think for me, what made me most comfortable with the principal who hired me was he was like, look, I know you know sports. I don't need to hire somebody I have to teach the sports side to. I can teach you how to be an assistant principal. I can teach you how to grow in that realm. He said, but if you're doing that, I don't need somebody I got to teach to do 2 things. So he was like, look, I want to be able to have somebody who can come in, they're plug in, fit, ready to go, and they can handle sports. And I can help you with the, AP side of things. He said, but that's if you really want to do it. So for me, I think to your question, it's the belief you have in the individual that you're potentially going to be working for, or the school system, headmaster, whomever. But also, looking at the school, what do they offer? Like I've been in a variety of schools. I've been in Title I schools. I've been in inner city schools. I've been in rural schools. This was the first time I would be in a more affluential school where, a lot of our students had, come from two parent households. And, so I really wanted this challenge because it was different. It was different. I think I'm pretty certain I'm the first African-American AD at the school and probably AP if I'm not mistaken. I'm currently, if you look at our feeder pattern, I'm the only African American assistant principal or administrator in our feeder pattern, meaning our high school, our middle school, and our elementary schools that feed to us. So it was unique in the sense that I was stepping out of my comfort zone. I know that we do have minority kids that go there, though the population is smaller. I wanted them to see a face that looked like theirs in a different role outside of a custodian or a secretarial role. So really, a lot of it was just personal desires to have other kids who are kind of underrepresented in this school see people doing stuff in a different light outside of those kind of worker bee roles, and give them something else to aspire to and just be a voice in the person that they can reach out to. So that was kind of like, a big motivating factor and a plus behind me taking this job because of the nuance and just being able to do things that hadn't been done before.
Yeah, and I think to your point, the relationships that it sounds like you've always been able to develop, this adds to that as they see something that they can now aspire to, right? Based
Right.
on what you just shared, which is awesome. All right, let me go back to something you said earlier about part of your roles as the assistant principal are observation of teachers.
Mhm.
What have you learned doing that that you have been able to transfer to coaching in regards to not just evaluation, but techniques? I'm real big on like cross-disciplinary study.
Mhm.
I think we're in a culture in the modern era of sports specialization. I think people get trapped, and you have a unique window in that not only are you the athletic director looking at all your programs, but now you're also in the classroom evaluating teaching. What have you been able to steal from there or learn in that space that has actually enhanced your ability to do your other job?
Well, I would say this first and foremost: 9 chances out of 10, great coaches are great teachers, hands down. If I have a great coach on campus, he or she is a great teacher in the classroom more often than not. But really, I mean, they parallel so much. I think one thing I've been kind of stressing to my coaches is having a practice plan together. it's the same thing as having a lesson plan. You don't go into a teacher's classroom and not see a lesson plan, objectives on the board, something on the board. Not only from a coach's standpoint does it keep you out of the court, but also if you do go there, you have a body or a framework to show what you were accomplishing on that day of practice. So that's second nature in the classroom. You know you're not going to go into a teacher's classroom and not see a lesson plan, objectives, or something on the board. You're going to know what students will know what the objective of the day is, how they're going to accomplish it. Same thing should be happening at practice. You know what you're trying to get better on that day. Now, obviously, it's not going to be 100% scripted. There may be some things that differ, or you may see in the course of practice, this was working. Let's go with it. This wasn't working. Let's kick that out, put something else in. But essentially, those things line up. Some other things I've learned really just kind of that time management piece, the planning piece. You see all those good things in there. And then also just I think for us, what I've learned is the investment of our coaches is it's richer and it's deeper when they are classroom teachers and coaches because they're invested. I was sitting in a session when we were at the conference in Orlando, and people were talking about the influx of community coaches or lay coaches, what we call them here, but non-teacher coaches leading programs, which does not happen in Georgia. You cannot do that. You can be a lay coach or a community coach on the staff, but you cannot be a head coach. Now, there are ways around it where you put other staff members on your staff, but your community coach who's probably more experienced in that sport is leading it, but on paper, they're never the head coach. So I think what I learned from that is there is more investment because a person who does not do what we do, who does not understand the scope of school, but understands sports and that particular sport in general, that's their passion. That's what they care about. They may breach, break, or step around a lot of rules, but a teacher who understands why we're going through those things, it makes my life a lot easier because they understand that I'm not just creating this rule out of nowhere, but there's a reason and rationale behind why we're moving this way with this particular sport or thing we're doing, this extracurricular activity, because we have to. And I think that for me is one of the bigger things I've been able to kind of marry between the AP role and the AD role and dealing with the coaching aspect.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting take. Number one, that you can't be a off-campus head coach in the state of Georgia. That's fascinating to me. That one, you can still find enough people that are available to do it in the modern age.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough for sure.
But I think, let's call it the policy, makes sense for all the reasons you just described. And, whether or not we can get more people into teaching and coaching, who knows? But it's a really interesting approach that the state has taken, but it's to what you just described, giving you that insight into, well, here's why. And it's set up that way for a reason. I love that. Okay. What would you say is the best thing you do in your program that you take with you wherever you go? And you can go all the way back to Buffalo to now, or you can say, you know what? I was watching my swim team the other day, and this thing is so transformational that I've now started to offer this as an observation point to all my other coaches.
I think so. I'll layer it. I think the first thing that I've kind of taken in this role is there is a athletic advisory committee that I do, and what I do is allow coaches to pull students from their programs to be a part of this committee. And I don't care if the kid is a starter; they could be a bench warmer, but I want them to embody what it is to be a quality teammate, a quality kid in the program. I want them to be a multiplier. So a coach who's no longer on my staff used to say this all the time. He said, you got a couple different kind of kids. He said, you got subtractors who they just take away from the environment. You got additions who they add to it. He said, you got multipliers who it's so infectious they can spread it to everybody. And really the program, the rationale behind this, and we're 5 years running now, and I've been here 5 years. We've done 5 annual Christmas give backs. I love this program the most because we are very fortunate. Our kids are very blessed. Their parents are strong community. Parents take care of them. Again, it's not 100% across the board, but for the most part, we're a very lucky and fortunate school. But the student advisory committee, it's all about service. We shop for families at Christmas time. We help to stack bags to go out to feed people during Thanksgiving. We participate in field days. We go out and help at elementary schools when they need us. for me, that's one of the biggest things. I know it may seem odd because it's not directly the sport, but for me, it's allowing students the opportunity to grow holistically and be a part of their communities and embed themselves in their communities. And in turn, what this has done now has increased community support across the board for our kids because now, I mean, we're at a point where there are organizations in our community that reach out to me, hey, do you have student athletes who can come and do this? Can they come do X, Y, and Z? Can they come help mentor some kids, can they sponsor a class and come in once a month and just read to the kids or talk to young men who need help? For me, that's the most powerful thing that I've been able to bring to the school that I brought to my previous schools is because a lot of our kids aren't going to go on to play college sports. Some and they definitely won't go on to play pro, and then some will. A very small few will, but it's less than 1%. So what else do you bring to the table? What else do you do? How else are you benefiting your community? How else are you growing? How else are you able to help and pour into other people? And if I can do one thing, that would be the most important thing to me is leave something behind that is bigger than wins and losses, touchdowns, that kids can say, you know what, I was able to do this during my time. And hopefully they continue it and it carries on. But also the other rewarding part is I have kids who are on teams and kids who aren't on teams like, hey, Mr. Hammond, I want to be on this. Like I want to do this. I know you already got 2 kids from boys soccer, but let me be a third. If you got a vacancy or you need help, let me come do this. So for me, that is the biggest thing because its effect can be seen, and it doesn't matter if you're the biggest program on campus, smallest program on campus, your role still matters. You do a lot, you help people. So for me, that's my biggest, I don't want to say feather and cap, but one of the most important things that I feel like I've been able to bring to the school. And it's just a ripple effect of kindness.
Yeah, and I would say that there are other versions of that I've heard throughout the years I've been doing this, and it's something that we have been dabbling with, but have not been able to go all in on yet. And this is just another reminder of the power of however you frame the group, getting kids from all different sports together for common goal, whether it be instructive, you're trying to teach them culture to take back to their teams, or whether yours is about service. The idea of making or organizing kids in a way that it's clear that it's about something bigger than themselves is, really what we use sports for at the end of the day.
Right.
And I talk often that, our kind of tenets here, athletics is about teaching leadership, followership, and how to be part of something bigger than yourself. And how are we doing that on a daily basis? And I think that that group allows you to have a bigger footprint than you would, if you just did the job in a traditional fashion. I'm going to ask a totally off-brand question here because I'm curious. So you grew up in Ohio, you said near the Cleveland area. Then you were in college in New York and Buffalo, and you stayed there, then South Carolina, and now Georgia. How would you describe, actually, hell, say whatever you want about it, but how do those areas differ in regards to the approach to both education-based athletics and what I call the youth sports industrial complex, which is all the outside stuff that's taken over the world? But how are each of those areas different than one another, and how are they similar?
All right. So, growing up in East Cleveland, which is just, neighboring of Cleveland, it's a very poor neighborhood. At this point right now, the school I went to, Shaw in East Cleveland, is kind of run by the state. And some of my friends have coached there, some of my friends have worked there. And when the state takes over a school, it's not a good thing. You lose a lot of autonomy for what you can do, what teachers can do, and you'll eventually lose teachers. So from that standpoint, I loved growing up in East Cleveland. Though we were close, we were close knit. I think once you don't have a lot, you creative. You kind of figure out a way to make things work. But also growing up there, you know what? If Justin's mom saw Leon cutting up, Justin's mom gonna tear Leon's butt up, and then Leon gonna get it from his mom when he get home too. So it was one of those things where it was really a community forged under hard times and pressure. And then going to Buffalo, a lot of the reason why I went to Buffalo is because one, I didn't want to go to like Ohio State and Columbus. Not that I could have played there, but I didn't want to go there because a bunch of people from my school went there. A bunch of people from local schools went there. It was just like a bigger version of high school. Even though it's going to be 50,000 some kids, somehow, some way, I know we would all end up finding each other in that big city or school in Columbus. So, Canisius College is in Buffalo. Buffalo was a, 3.5 hour Greyhound ride or 3 hour car ride right up 90 East, through PA, through Erie, and you're in Buffalo. But going to Buffalo, it was very similar to Cleveland. Cold weather. I don't know why I ever decided to stay in cold weather, but I'm glad I moved away from it. So let's, throw that caveat out there. But it was very similar. I worked in inner city schools, worked in inner city charter schools. Canisius, though a private school, is right in the city of Buffalo. So for me, in my mindset, it was just like home. Like, I knew the urban environment. I knew how to maneuver around it. For me, it was just no change. And then also money was great. I maybe paid like $1,400 to go to school, and Canisius being a private school at the time, that was great. Was able to play football there. It was 1AA. Program ended my midway through my freshman year due to Title IX. They cut the program, but honored my money to be there. Some donors of the program and stuff took a liking to me, paid for my books while I was still there for 4 years. So for me, it was like home. Like I said, going to South Carolina, that's where the drastic difference started to happen. I wasn't in the city. I was rural. Like, I mean, you can look up in the sky and see the night stars. It was quiet. All you hear was crickets, and you see deer popping out everywhere. Night and day for me. But again, I began to get accustomed to it. It was just like, oh, I can sleep without hearing trains or buses or, people yelling or, worrying about, violence. I was like, okay, this is a different environment now. So that was different. So again, to the first two scenarios, Buffalo and Cleveland, it was very much so the same. I don't think there was, for me, I don't recall there being a lot of parental involvement. So your coaches assumed the role of parents and took care of you. Sometimes it was getting you breakfast, getting you lunch or dinner, getting you to practice or getting you home from practice. That's why I developed a good relationship with one of my coaches because, I mean, I even drove his truck to prom. He helped pay for my tux and stuff. So it was your coaches were like your family and raised you. Same thing in Buffalo. We were taking kids home, which I know in a lot of things today is a no-no. Don't put a kid in your car. But when a kid couldn't get home and in Buffalo and you take public transportation, but they live on the other side of town, you get on practice at 8 o'clock, you got to get that kid home. Somebody got to get them home. And their parents don't have a car, how are they going to get home? Uber wasn't a big thing. You take a taxi. So we took them home. South Carolina, it was similar but different. And I always tell people this: I'd rather be city poor than rural poor any day. Because at least if I'm city poor, I can get on a bus and go someplace. I can still walk around the city and do something. When you're rural poor, man, in South Carolina, where I was at in Orangeburg and I was working in Nice, South Carolina, it was nothing but wide open spaces. I had kids who was missing practice because they had to go in watermelon fields and work, or a kid who hurt his back pulling watermelon. So he was out 2 games before the state championship because his back was messed up. But again, this was work he had to do to help his family provide, food and money for them. So again, still not a wealthy place. But again, in that small town, football was everything. Parents were there on Friday night. You might have not seen them a lot during the school week, but they was going to be in the stands on Friday night. They was at the state championship game on that Thursday up in Columbia. They were there. So that was very similar. Then you come to Georgia, where I'm at now, very affluent. Schools graduation rate for our whole county, each school is at least 88% or higher. Our school's 95% right now. So you got more helicopter parenting, and I would assume probably more you and I have some of the similar issues with what goes on in our schools now, where you are and where I am now. So it was just different. Parental involvement is more here. Sometimes it's too much, but a lot of times it's great. Financially, you don't really have to worry about things. You make money off people attending games, but also parents are willing to donate, businesses are willing to donate. In those inner city schools I was at, there wasn't a lot of parental involvement or businesses coming around to donate. There were people who would show up to games, but there was different levels of safety concerns there at those particular places than there are here. So I think really the biggest differences I've seen is just one, parental involvement. And I keep coming back to that because that makes a big difference, whether it be money, for participation fees, which we have here, which in other schools we didn't. Like, school pay for uniforms. You might get them once every 4 years. You make the best of it. Coach was kind of put together packages so you can get your cleats. If not, there was a barrel of cleats. You get what you get out of there and you make it happen. So, it just was different in those aspects. But I could say um, when you've been in all those, it definitely changes your scope and view. And it also gives you a different perspective when you're dealing with kids, because even in an area like McIntosh, we do have kids and families who struggle. And a lot of people sometimes don't understand that plight because they think, oh, this is McIntosh. There's, median income might be $700,000, $800,000. There's money here, but no, there's some trailer parks in smaller areas that are attached to our county that kids come to us, and it's like, okay, I can understand their background. I've been there before. I've come from there. While others who've grown up in this area all the time or their whole lives don't seem to get it, I can understand it and work with them.
So with all of that, and I'm going to go specifically into the, let's call it fundraising portion of this, because I think often coaches on this are curious about that. What are some things and techniques that you could offer that transfer across all of those school environments, be it whether you're coming from Title I school or a school that is affluent? What are some things that you have seen work that allow for supporting of our student athletes that transfer regardless of the environment you're in?
Gotcha. So I think I would say the marketing piece of being able to raise funds is my strong suit. So my master's in sports administration. So I've worked in pro sports. I've done other, avenues of that. So I think for me, the number one thing is know your market and know your clientele. Know who you're dealing with. Know how you can price things and how you can't price things. I know when I was in South Carolina, I could, what I could price for $5,000 a year here, probably can go for $2,000 there. So know that. The other thing I would say is the best salesman of your program or your kids is you, and then obviously your kids. So you got to put yourself out there. You can't be afraid to have conversations with people, but you also have to you got to use old school models, which I'm sure you're used to, that I'm used to. You got to put yourself out there. Go door to door. Go to business. Make calls. Go show up. Talk to them. Show them what you're doing. Show them what you're doing for your kids and how this is going to benefit them. But also, your kids in your program have to be salesmen and salespersons of their program. A lot of people want to utilize our digital platforms, and they're great, especially in this age where people want to just put their card down on Venmo or something like that. That's cool and that's good. But I see with so many things, we're starting to target and hit the same people over and over again within our community. And it kind of runs dry. But then also with scams and schemes going on, like, hey, is this real? Like, are you really doing this? So I think one of the biggest things is you got to do, like I said, is you have to really be personable and get out there and go and talk to people. Go and talk to people and show them what the need is and why you have that need. So that's one aspect of it. But also, knowing your market and what you can charge for certain things. And then, some of the traditional things do still work. You can still do a lift-a-thon. You can do some of those things that you've always done. But also we all like something, whether it's something free, a piece of cloth, a piece of swag. You got to find ways to incentivize it to make it palatable for people. And then obviously, even bigger than that, you got to make the right hires, coaches who are going to be transformational within your kids and your programs. They're going to turn you around and make you successful or help you become more competitive to get those wins. Because at the end of the day, everybody loves a winner. We can all be bandwagon people at times. It is a cliche saying, but it is true. But one of the biggest things is, like we've seen for our programs, is we had to get wins to get people in the stadium, and that came with making a change in coach, a coach that was getting out there. My coach goes and talks to people, and he's very candid and honest, even if sometimes it's something they don't like, but this is what he is, because he's going to stand on what he said he was going to stand on. They understand that, okay, this is how he operates. This is what he's going to do. And this is the expected outcome. So we've had those successes there in the last 2 years with a new football coach. So really, keep growing and learning. If you got conferences you can go to, like we did the NADC, or if you have local state conferences to go to, look up and see what new funds, what funds they're doing. I don't want to, kind of, I don't know what's the word. I don't want to, not advertising for anybody in particular, because I don't know who you got on your podcast who offers you sponsorship dollars, but there's enough people out there who are using various platforms that you can use if you are a very techie person Or if you're in an area like if you were in Silicon Valley, I'm sure you would be trying to, go digital and get some of that money, and probably your area too, based on the needs of parents. So I think really getting out to businesses locally and hitting that market, because I think one of the things I found too is there's so many companies that want to call on your behalf, and that kind of waters it down. Well, I'm calling on behalf of Stevenson. No, you're not. You're not calling. I had a car wash who said, "Hey, we donated $1,000. Where's our sign up at the stadium?" I'm like, "Who'd you donate it to?" Because I never talked to you. You got paperwork? Well, it says this company. They said they were McIntosh. I said, no, I don't know them. I mean, so that's why I want my face to be out there, or my coaches' faces to be out there, so they know. All right, well, I've talked to Leon, I've talked to Coach Smith, I've talked to Coach Isley or Coach Anderson. This is okay. This is legitimate. So those would be my advice on it. I mean, you got to be a salesman or a salesperson to really make things happen, especially in this day and age where people can give to a lot of different causes. You got to make them understand why yours is important and why these kids are important.
No doubt. And I think the takeaways there are, one, know your market. And it's different in each market you're in, but there is a market or the town wouldn't exist, right? So how do you utilize that information and that knowledge to craft your program that's going to ultimately serve your kids? And the other thing I think that was said, but maybe it slid through the cracks, is you have to be out there as the face, but also your coaches do, because a lot of times, especially when it's parent driven, they are responding to the influence that you had on their children. And therefore, right, it might be your cross country coach, it might be your golf coach who all of a sudden, like, this person was transformational and we want to give to said sport or the overarching program because the impact this person had. So also rallying your troops to help you be the face of the program and to make sure that they are all mission aligned with what you're doing, because everybody's situation is different. Right. And I think I love that you shared that. I'm going to go pivot all the way back to something you also said earlier about being in the AP role and in the athletic director role at a school where the population of students of color isn't huge, but having somebody in your case who's in a leadership role, right, gives some aspirational value in addition to what you bring to the table outside of that. How would you say that you being there in this new role, what are the challenges that you have faced, and what are the ways in which the equity and inclusion and belonging have come along based on what you shared earlier?
I think coming into this role, a lot of so people call Peachtree City the bubble. It's the bubble for a reason. A lot of people don't want to leave it. They got their own shop, stores. Like, they really wanted to. It's like they wanted to secede from the union years ago. They wanted to pull out away from Fayette County and just become their own thing, which is it's crazy, but it's true. So I think my presence was needed because it, it gave people an opportunity to interact with me, to interact with somebody who looked differently than them, to see that though our hues may be different, we do have some similar beliefs. We do believe in those same kids, and we want the betterment of all the kids that are there. So I think it gave them an opportunity to say, okay, here's somebody who I may not on the surface thought I had something in common with, but after sitting down and discussing things with them, okay, I understand where they're coming from. He's not, I can't speak for everybody, but they, now we have a better understanding from one another. But also just the ability to, from a kid standpoint and from a student standpoint, to show them that, you know what, you got somebody here you can come and talk to. Because you and I both know, like, when we're sitting when we, even as ADs and we're grown adults, when we go to these conferences, if we go into a room and we see somebody from Cali or I see somebody from Georgia, I'm probably going to be more apt to go sit with them because I know them or they're from my state. I may have had some type of connection with them. So we know that's how kids are. Kids are cliquey. They're going to go with people. If they walk into a room and they don't know anything or anybody in there, they may go to somebody that looks like them or somebody's of the same gender as them or something of that nature that's going to draw them to them before they really get to know who people are. So I think for me, I'm not perfect. And, I still got to discipline you no matter who you look like, what you are, and sometimes that's going to rub people the wrong way. It may cause me to lose a few sponsorship dollars. That's why I want the coaches to be out there. But, in that role, that's what I got to do. I really think it just gives a chance to build a bridge, and it's something different that the school hadn't had. And you know what? Representation is key in all facets, and we want to be inclusive in all the things we do because things are changing no matter how. I'm using my words carefully. Here in Georgia, we can be very exclusive at times, or resistant to inclusivity. Um, you know, it's the inevitable. It's going to happen. You may not like it, or they may not like it, I should say, but it's going to happen. So I think for me, you gotta, what? It's here. And you got to deal with it no matter whether you like it, no matter whether our governor said we are not permitted to use DEI, those terms or acronyms in our state. It's not going to change. The population is changing. We have a higher population of Hispanic students here. We have a decent population of English as a second language learner kids here. So these changes are coming to our school doors, and you got to be willing to adjust and change with them because I've seen number of teachers, I feel like, in my personal opinion, they've retired because of the changes that happen. Like at McIntosh, there's teachers who are here for 20 plus years. They're lifers. They don't leave this place, which makes it harder for me to get coaches at times because they don't leave. But they have been transitioning out since COVID based on not want to be in the school, which I get. But also, some of them I felt like have transitioned based on the population and cultural change in our school. Our principal is very intentional about trying to, and these are public things, increase our minority enrollment in our AP classes. And some parents didn't seem to understand that. I said, but when you have more kids being successful in AP, you have less kids taking dual enrollment classes, but they're earning the credits here. And also, when that number goes up, the overall improvement for the school goes up when you see that success. We're only as strong as our weakest link. So you got to pull everybody up. And you know what? Guess what? If kids can get that experience and become strong and take these rigorous courses here, they'll be successful in college. So, or the idea is they should be successful in college, I should say, or whatever their next endeavor is. So, I would say my principal is very intentional about the inclusivity piece. And she makes no bones about it for everybody to know that that is important to us. And that's what we need to do.
No, I love that. And we'll talk a little bit more offline about some of the challenges you're facing, but let me wrap with this. What is something you've most recently changed your mind on? And it doesn't have to be sports related. It can be, but I always am curious about the growth of me and by proxy, right? Hopefully we're all trying to get better at what we do, regardless of what it is, even if it's just navigating the day. But where, I used to be dug in and over here on this, and now I'm over here, and here's why. And it was intentional, right? It didn't just fall into it. It was like you made a conscious decision to change your mind about something.
Give me an example first. I need another example. Give me one that you changed your mind on recently. Let me flip it on you for a second. Come on, give me one.
I'll give you a simple one that is sports related, but yours doesn't have to be this. So when I first started coaching basketball, I was coming from a coaching tree of basically we're going to manage the game on every possession and we're going to run a ton of sets and we're going to control things. To where for the last 8 years, if I call one play a game, it's a lot. To now, I'm now having internal dialogue with myself and my former assistant as I transition from the boys program to the girls program, that we're not quite ready to play that way yet. So do I have to go back to calling plays? And so I am intentionally, it's super simple and pretty trivial, but it's like philosophically going from one extreme to the other and being like, all right, I've done this for 15 years. Like I got this dialed to now, oh wait, this isn't going to work. I have to go do something else. So something as simplistic as that to, hell, here's another one. When I have a daughter who's a junior in college, one that's a freshman and a son that's an 8th grader. And when the kids were younger, my children will tell you that they were the last kids in their peer group to get a cell phone. We live on my campus. My stance was like, look, you don't need it. I don't need that. We don't need that in your life. Ultimately, I know where you are. We had a house phone they could take with them, but you know, the way in which socializing has transitioned to online, they are now up in arms that my son got his phone the summer between his 6th and 7th grade year because I sent him with my oldest daughter to Seattle to go to a basketball camp, and she dropped him off, and I needed a way to contact him. And ultimately they're like, well, we didn't get this and we didn't get that. And it's like, no, the world's changed. And
Yeah.
ultimately I changed my position on it based on circumstances.
I would say for me, and being at the AD conference recently just reaffirmed my decision to, is I'm not a micromanager. Never have been. I feel like, adults should be adults and do their job. One of my principal sayings that I just love is that if I got to do your job, then I want your paycheck too. If I got to do yours, then I need your paycheck. So not a big micromanager. I'll set out the rules and what I think is clear and people should do them. But I find it more so lately that it has not been the case, or people are kind of taking what I've given as a directive as a suggestion and not a directive. So my intent now is to be more intentional about what my demands are or what my expectations are, putting definitive dates on things when I want them done, and giving actionable things they can follow, but also realistic consequences. So, for example, I wanted coaches to, in the essence of being more transparent, a lot of our clubs have their own booster clubs. And I think coaches seem to think their boosters think that, hey, what, we run the show, we're the boosters, we do this. And I'm like, no, you guys are an entity of the school system. So because you're an entity of the school system, you still report back to myself and or the principal, me, because she tasked me with athletics. So I told them, I said, hey, I want all of your your booster meeting minutes put online on our athletic website under your sports page. I have an SID guy. You send it to him. He will craft the format in which you want them in. I had coaches who were reluctant to, well, we don't want to put our board meetings out there. Why do people need them? And I said, simply, there's a school board meeting every month on Monday. There's an executive meeting that Thursday of that week as well. Do you know that every school board meeting minutes are online, right? They can go to the FCBOE website. You can go into board meeting minutes and you can find them. I said, everything they discussed in there is there. They're not hiding anything. It's there, whether you agree with it, disagree with it, but you can't say it's not there. It's been omitted. I said, unless you have 100% parent attendance at all of your meetings, there are parents who are missing out on valuable information, especially when we're talking about programs where parents are giving, I don't know, $1,200, $1,400 for participation fees, $800, $1,000. When you're talking about that kind of money being given, and then you're spending money and you're delegating and putting it here and there, but they don't have any idea where it's going, or that's what they're saying. And I explained it at the booster meeting. Well, guess what? You only had 10, 15% of your parents there. The other people need to know. So I told them if that wasn't done, there was going to be a consequence where I was going to write a letter reprimand them, and I was going to put it in their file. And everybody except for one got it done, and it went in their file. He was like, I really can't believe you. No, I really can't believe you didn't do what I asked you to do. Because this is simple. This isn't an issue of me trying to pull rank, but this is an issue of transparency. People, when it comes to dollars and cents, is one of the top things that can get you fired. Outside of touching a kid or hitting a kid or harming a kid, playing with money will get you fired. It just will. So guess what? Here we are being transparent. This was our meeting. We set it this date and this time. People who did not attend, you can view what was discussed in the board meeting here, in our booster meeting minutes here. So that was just one example, one of the things that I wanted to be done. And now, with FHS courses, I'm setting deadlines. All right. We want a PD throughout the year. I know we have a number of you who are at elementary schools in our district, and we can't always all get together. Maybe everybody can't make it a 7:00 coaches meeting. So guess what? I may assign an NFHS course. You already have an account because we got to do certain ones anyway. You need to have it done by this deadline. All right. Because some of my coaches will professionally grow on their own. Others, they need to be prodded and pushed a little bit more. And that's okay. I know everybody's not going to be perfect. So guess what? Here's the prodding and the pushing to get you to get this done. And if the carrot that I got to hang over you to get it done is this is the reprimand at the end if you don't, it may sound harsh to other people, but guess what? These things need to get done. Like, what I'm giving you is not a suggestion. I'm giving you tools and things to do to help you on the back end so that people can say, yes, we are trying to grow as coaches. Yes, we are doing things to get better. Yes, we are trying to be as transparent as possible with our parents so that we can alleviate a lot of issues. Because you would agree too, I'm sure, that most of the issues we have is just a lack of communication. Either a parent wants to jump past a coach and come to you, and they never communicated to him or her that this was the issue, and or a coach did not effectively explain why something went the way it went to a kid and or a parent. My preference would be explain it to that kid, because they're the one playing for you. They're the one with you every day. Explain to them, help them understand what's going on, whether it be this is where you grow to get better, this is where you're not meeting the mark, or this is why I made the decision based on, strategy. This is what was done, and that's why it happened. If things were communicated more effectively in a sometimes dumbed down way for kids, but even sometimes you got to dumb it down for parents because they may not understand the X's and O's of what you're doing, but just explaining why you did it, that may alleviate a lot of problems that end up on your desk and my desk, I would assume. So that's one of the things where I'm being very intentional about. These are the expectations. It may seem a little micromanaging, but when you had the leash that was 20 feet, 30 feet long, you were just running wild. you were running wild. So now we got to rein that thing back in a little bit, because sometimes people let the successes that we've had kind of camouflage the issues, the underlying issues that are going on. So no, we're going to bring them to the surface and discuss them as a whole. We're going to SWOT analysis it when we get back on January 2nd. We're going to bring those issues to a head. But guess what? We're bringing them to a head. So hopefully we can all see that through the success, we still have some areas to grow and we can get better. And, a lot of people who are afraid to have discussions with their colleagues or counterparts to coach, no, this is the time to put it out there, because don't keep coming to me to put it out there and then you want me to mediate 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds. No, we're adults. Put your big pants on and, have a discussion.
I love that. And for those of you that are unfamiliar, SWOT analysis, we learned in Orlando: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Do one of your program. You find out a lot. Coach, thanks for being here today. Appreciate the time.
You, man.
We are going to definitely talk soon.
Appreciate you, Justin, man. Have a great New Year's. And, man, thank you for inviting me on. I had a good time talking with you. I definitely want to learn some more from you, because I want to come out and visit, man. I want to come out and visit and go golfing.